Hello and welcome to my session. My name is Adnan Hendricks. I'll be talking about securing your cloud infrastructure. You can follow me on social media channels with @microspecialist. I pretty much work with Azure infrastructure, Microsoft 365, and security. So that's who I am, what I do. This session is all about how we can achieve trust in cloud instead of trying to build castles in the sky. So with my next slide, this is where you guys can find my email address and contact me after the session if you have any questions or just want to chat about cloud. So for the agenda of the session, the theme is all about how you can fortify your cloud infrastructure in the cloud. And pretty much like people used castles in the old days, and even in the old days, they weren't that secure. So just to show you what I will be covering briefly, I will start with cyber trends, what's pretty much playing at the moment, and then look at security basics, basic security ops, hygiene, things that you should be doing already. Looking at GRC, and GRC is really just governance, risk, and compliance. Look and see how you can go and apply that within your cloud infrastructure. What's new in cloud security? Because security is a big thing right now. There's constant changes happening, newer threats evolving. So there are always new updates on how we can go and beat those threats, and then hopefully leave you with a review and some homework in the end. Right now, we're living in the most, what I call a privileged generation, connected as never before. Me coming to you live, the comfort of my home. I added this picture to this website, to my presentation that I got from a website, which is from the James Webb Telescope, basically looking back in time at clouds billions of light years away. And it just shows how far we've come as human beings living in the digital age of cloud, where you could pretty much set up a company in a day, get rich or poor buying crypto. Possibilities are endless, and also having the ability to with modern technology to be able to look at pictures such as these. So I'm just going to kill my webcam to reserve bandwidth and continue the session without my face being a distraction. So right now, this is the current state of affairs. And I like to show people handy solutions to problems. And also as a consultant myself, that busy build and try to protect Azure infrastructure at clients all over the world. I like to reside on the use of partners and people with intelligence. And Microsoft, as a good partner, analyzes 43 trillion security signals daily. So we all know about how having enough data allows you to actually make better decisions. So with all the number of security signals that Microsoft gets, they do 15 billion internet observations, and there's tons and thousands of dedicated security researchers and engineers that work on services and software to not only protect Microsoft, but also a lot of their clients, getting information on threats in the cybersecurity space around the globe. And by tapping into that information and data and some of their software, where they deal with about 72 billion threats blocked, it really gives you an advantage if you didn't have the use of these kind of software. And this is the state that we're living in, right? It's always an attacker's advantage and a defender's dilemma, because as a defender, you pretty much have to ensure that you have everything covered so you can't get hacked. And an attacker only really has to hit once. It's the same thing like those emails that get sent out. They'll just blanket send it to thousands of email addresses, and it just really takes one person to click on the link to get hacked, and for things like ransomware to end the company. So being the good guys, we are always on the back foot, and that's just the situation that we have. And the reason for that being is that attack services are really cheap. I mean, just looking at things like exploit kits, ransomware, um, uh, 0 days, and spear phishing services, you can basically buy for a small amount, and even just by downloading some software off the internet, like an ISO, you can hack away. So I always say it's not really hacking if I bought your credentials. So the main focus is to try to get onto MFA, passwordless, and zero trust. It's really a focus of previous talks that I had. So you could do a search on YouTube and find some of the sessions that I've done on zero trust, passwordless, and MFA. But you really need to enable cloud protection services because we've never been connected as before, multiple devices, and the internet is really that glue that binds us together. And most of the challenges we face, and sometimes that I deal with as a consultant, having to sift through, public endpoints and things that might be a risk to a client. Sometimes the client doesn't even know that there's a public endpoint uh, that's live in their current environment. Also, the complexity that some people create by having multi-cloud environments, things that are, configured incorrectly, and that sort of thing, and not having experienced personnel sometimes setting up, because in the beginning some things are easy to set up but maybe not in a secure way. So increased number of sophisticated attacks that's been happening since last year, and even here, companies in the Netherlands where I'm based, that's been hacked for like since 2020, and even in the end of 2019 are still rebuilding some of their systems because they didn't end up paying the ransomware. All their systems got pretty much encrypted, and it all had to do with an admin account that didn't have multi-factor authentication, that was for a limited time reset to a password that was easily guessed. And that was welcome 2020. And unfortunate for them, the hackers were already present in the organization, and they were busy scanning and noticed that that admin account password was changed, and that's when the environment was owned. So a lot of concerns still with people, even though it's perfectly fine, using cloud
Yeah, Steve, yeah.
architectures,
Mm.
things
No.
like confidentiality, uh, integrity, privacy, and the increased attack surface with having hybrid environments. So people still worried about loss of data, control of data, and ensuring that the settings are configured so data as integrity and also a lot of privacy. But this is where Azure comes in, right? All the controls are pretty much built in, and Microsoft provides a lot of services and products to help you secure your environment. So security uh, from the start to safeguard your data, your processes, your technology. Um, Encryption pretty much always available. It's your data, so privacy and control is in your hands, and that's also where that shared responsibility comes in. Always the offer to have multiple levels of compliancy and industry standards and certifications that you can do controls on your configurations to ensure that you meet those compliance standards And Microsoft always provides enough transparency to show you where your data is located, how it's managed through things like the Microsoft Trust Center, for example. And this is something that I always tell my clients, especially new clients, that Azure or Office 365 and Azure services were the first commercially available public cloud services to achieve the highest compliance standard in the world. But it's all a joint responsibility between a cloud provider and the customer. So never forget, I still come across clients that still don't fully understand that your cloud provider only does a limited part in securing and keeping your data safe. But if you as the customer, you don't secure your endpoints that are open to the internet, then it's not really the responsibility of your cloud provider. And pretty much 80%, if not more, of the responsibility, in my view, lies with that customer. So, all the physical aspects, but if you have a website and that website is open, you haven't put a firewall or an application gateway, or you've allowed a virtual machine to have a public IP address and that's accessible from internet, then that's just something that you didn't configure correctly. So this is quite a large impact and responsibility that companies and clients, administrators need to look at. But back to the basics, right? So the basics, some of the important focus on security, with daily hacks and accounts. A lot of us to do with identity, um, accounts and systems running Windows Server OS, also identities in a hybrid infrastructure, and also looking at things how you can remediate security issues with Azure services, networking, service security backups, always important, and also making sure that you have your updates in place. So when looking at things like securing operating systems, things like having a good Defender, like Windows Defender, exploit protection, Defender for endpoints, things like credential guards and smart screen, and ensuring that you have things that are protecting you in the way that have exploit and threat protection to things like the built-in security app, especially with Windows and Defender products. So much in the same way, I could say that, just like people are stronger together, lean on one another's strengths, the same qualifies for IT infrastructure. So the strengths of partners and the software that they use gives you a greater reach and experience when dealing with security. And that's always why I say cloud security is a must, especially with that internet connecting us all and all those different devices. So this list is really just some of the basic identity and network infrastructure security features you should already be deploying within your organization. So ideally moving to something like passwordless and utilizing multi-factor authentication, MFA, for your accounts. And just by doing MFA, you already prevent a large number of identity threats. But there's always user education that you have to do, because in some scenarios where people didn't fine tune their conditional access policies and MFA access, where users would get a response on their authenticator app and would just click OK instead of thinking, am I signing in at this point in time? And then there's a lot of things that you can fine grain those prompts. So things like enable password block lists, where you already block frequently used passwords, managing protected users. Also through things like group policy, to allow the protection of the built-in administrators group on Windows servers. So a lot of these things, hardening domain controllers, because we still use domain controllers, and enable password policies. But like I said, when moving towards passwordless and utilizing MFA, a lot of these password policies aren't needed in a cloud environment. And then when looking at networking, always ensure things like firewalls, domain isolation, um, making sure that the right communications are open through NSGs, and then those advanced Azure services, Defender for Cloud, which we'll look at in a bit, and things like Microsoft Sentinel, which gives you an overall view that can pull signals from a number of different sources. So moving to GRC, or governance in the cloud, also risk, how you can manage risk and compliance. In your Azure subscription, you can focus on your governance, risk, and compliance through management groups by defining that organizational hierarchy. Things like Azure policy to give you control and allow you to enforce specific controls and settings. With blueprints, you can deploy and create templates of environments so that whenever you have to, start up and deploy a new infrastructure by utilizing a blueprint, much like an architecture of a building, if you deploy the same blueprint, the exact same controls and measures will be created. And then obviously things you want to do a lot of searches. The resource graph in Azure allows you to query, analyze, and get that visibility of information of your Azure services and environment. And cost being quite an important issue, especially with building in the cloud and knowing that whenever you're deploying something, the cost will incur. So this is where you want to monitor cloud spend and optimize those resources so that you don't overspend. And there's a lot of tools like the Azure Advisor that can help you in that regard. So this is a great overview of setting up management groups where you can apply segmentation strategy. So based on the hierarchy in your environment, you'd be able to create groups based on either departments and then place the subscriptions for those departments in that management group, which will allow you to enable different controls. For example, security settings, capabilities, even allowing you to define which resources are allowed to be deployed in those different management groups through Azure policy. But it's not just about GRC or governance, risk, and compliance. It's not only about deciding what regulations and standards to adhere to, but also who and how they are managed. So you have to have specific roles responsible, especially to jump in during incidents and make sure that they have a playbook and know what to do in the event of an incident. So just setting up specific controls is not enough. Also ensuring that you have the right responsible parties, for example, in the different segments like endpoint security, network security, policy management, and also for identity, because we can't all be experts in everything, right? So also teamwork makes the dream work. So that was some of the ways in which you can enable that. And then looking at governance in Azure, how we can apply that is really through assigning Azure policy. Azure policy is a service that you can enforce or create through command line or the portal, utilizing ARM as the centralized complaint plane. And with those policies, you can effect on what you will allow or disallow in your environment. And especially when people are starting fresh, you want to try and protect people from making mistakes. So the next picture is really a governance view of what it looks like. and the DevOps view, but I'm just going to jump straight into my environment and just quickly show you in my environment where I have management groups, quickly to start off, where you can create an organizational structure, and based on the environment that you have, whether you're having a production environment, a test environment, then operations, you can then go and configure policies for those. I'm just going to jump quickly to policies, and some of the policies that you quite often want to have. For example, in the case of, let's say, a policy to ensure that no virtual machines are created with a public IP. For example, I've already created a policy. I'm just going to drill down and take you to that. This is one of the policies that I've created, but it really sets, if I show you how that works in practice, like let's say I want to ensure that my production resource groups where I want to create virtual machines, somebody won't go and make a mistake and accidentally deploy virtual machines that might have a public IP address. Yeah, I'm just going to select Windows, fill in some of the requirements like a username, and then a compliant password. And whether somebody is trying to do this programmatically through command line, script, template, or through the portal, here you can see inbound port rules. The default is set to allow access to this virtual machine to any external IP address. That's why you get this warning through port or RDP port. I'm just going to click on review and create. And what it does is it will validate against my controls that I've set in. And you'll see that my validation has failed. So if I go look at the details, the summary will show this resource was disallowed by my policy. And the policy, what I just shown you, is that network interfaces should not have public IPs. So in this case, somebody could have defined something that could have been detrimental to our environment. So the reason computer says no, so does Adnan, which is something that I've customized with. But you can see in the raw error, people will get enough details on why. Now, generally, you'd want somebody to know, but sometimes you get new hires, they don't know the rules, and people forget, right? So policy is a great way to protect people from making mistakes. And especially when looking at your cloud environment, things like tools like Microsoft Defender for Cloud, which is a great way of helping you to configure your security posture in there. So just by showing, I just want to show you where I had a couple of virtual machines with public IPs, and they showed a lot of kicked off a couple of security alerts. And the thing is, if a virtual machine has a public port open, you'll notice that there's a lot of hackers that are constantly scanning public IP addresses. And that's what my defender has discovered, right? So here, traffic from IP addresses has been trying to access a virtual machine. Luckily, this virtual machine is no longer active. But just to show you the kind of the resource, my server, and also where these IPs are generated from. So hackers all the way from Russia, Lithuania, services and hackers in the Netherlands, Ukraine, are constantly scanning Azure public IP. So always ensure that you never accidentally have something like that active in your environment. If you do have to have I suggest using just-in-time virtual machine access, where you can set a specific time limit and more access controls on that RDP port. So it's only open when you want it to be open. The engineer will do the work, and at the end of the time limit, it will just not be accessible again. So that's a big plus if you set it up in that way, or utilize things like Azure Bastion Host to securely connect to a cloud resources. So not having public IP addresses. So as you can see, lots of attacks on virtual machines if they have public IP addresses. Yeah. The nice thing in this whole control of Defender for Cloud is that it will allow you to go and take action in the case that you have misconfigured something. So it will give you the advice how to mitigate the threat, send you to a link that will show you what you need to set up. So like I mentioned, just in time access, or ensuring that that NSG network security group disallows the IP address and the port for specific IP ranges. So only allowed for a specific IP range. So a lot of help, and this is all built in policies you have to set up. And a lot of the security controls in Defender for Cloud is free. The advanced controls, for example, VM vulnerability assessment, just-in-time VM accesses, and all these other extra controls are paid for. But getting started, a lot of the recommendations that are evaluated on your resources within your environment, you only have to go and enable all the controls to increase your security posture and also your score to make sure that you're more protected. So going back to my session, that was a quick overview on how you can apply governance utilizing policy, and also what the security center can provide for you. So a lot of ways in which you can securely manage your cloud. So Defender for Cloud, I've just done the demo. Protecting your data, Azure backup, and also monitoring is pretty much everywhere built in, including the monitoring service, log analytics, and application insights, etc. So there's no reason for you to not be able to secure your cloud resources through this product, which is built into Azure. So a lot of visibility control. You saw through the demo how in detail it showed which IPs, also based on where they're from, and also the type of attack. So it gives you that unified security management. And now I want to show you something else, something new. So you've just seen in my Azure subscription that with Defender for Cloud, I'm getting information on my systems in my subscription that are monitored. But how do hackers actually go to work? So this is where Microsoft has created two new products. So where I've just showed you running this detections from Defender for Cloud, where I could get an IP address. Let's say I want to get more information on this, find out who's behind this and why they are, attacking me. So Microsoft has two new products, two new great products. I think they're going to add a lot of value to the Defender lineup, and that's Microsoft Defender External Attack Surface Management, which will allow you to look at your environment, do a scan, and that runs pretty much in Azure. In your Azure subscription, you can add the service, external attack surface environment, and it will basically go and allow you to do a scan of your domain names, public IPs, and it will approach your environment in the same way a hacker would do scans on your environment and look and see what it will find. So luckily in my environment, it will give you an attack surface summary, what your security posture is, and it will also give you information on any CVEs or vulnerabilities in your environment. If there are any sensitive services that might be incorrectly configured that a hacker could access your environment through. So whereas the Defender for Cloud gives you information on the internal services that you have that might not be configured properly, this service looks at it on the outside, much the same way a hacker will go and try and do scans and try and detect a way to get into your environment. The other application that Microsoft has recently created and made available is the Defender Threat Intelligence. So this is where you'd be able to go and look and investigate specific threats, specific IP addresses you could search on, and it will show you what kind of threats, who's behind the threat, how that attack works, in the same way and how you can also go and mitigate those threats and just ensure that you are covered by this kind of exploit. So two new great products that will really give you a lot of help. So just jumping back into my session. Defender External Attack Surface Management is really to give you a 360-degree of your threat exposure. So it will really allow you to discover any internet-facing and exposed assets. And like I mentioned earlier, sometimes companies don't even know that those assets are there and that they are exposed. So this will give you insight into things that are attached to one of your domain names or IP ranges, and it will continuously monitor any devices and vulnerabilities without the need for agents or credentials. So there's a way you could also prioritize what devices, what resources need to be protected to ensure that you can better protect yourselves. So always looking from the outside in exactly the same way an attacker would scan your environment and find vulnerabilities. So this is more a nice overview where mine was pretty much secure, but this is a good example from a demo tenant where, for example, some vulnerabilities were found with expired certificates that could be taken advantage of, or domains. Quite often, a company wouldn't even know that a domain has been expired, and sometimes somebody else will go and re-register that domain or take control of that domain and hack you in that way. So a lot of good information that you can get through this new specific product. So in this example, a specific vulnerability, and then you can go and look at what device or asset. So the public IP that you have, where it is vulnerable, you can find out what service or system is really running that or hosting that service, how you can get access to your system. For example, port 22, port 179, that's still open. So that just allows you to secure your infrastructure and really close those gaps before they can be exploited. So really giving you that sometimes a lot of people have a pen test done, but pen tests are sometimes very specific, only with a specific approach in mind, and only on specific systems. This will actually look at your global infrastructure, anything to do with your company, and allow you to close those gaps. So with Defender Threat Intelligence, this will give you information on the threat actors that are targeting industries, your company, allows you to evaluate any suspicious IPs similar to the ones that were attacking my virtual machines that I could go and search in and get some more information, because Microsoft works not just with their own security services and teams, but in conjunction with security partners. And you could get gain from that information that they provide by giving you access to what they have for all these threat actors out there. So you could identify how they work, what tools they use, and by getting a better understanding of what they do, you could protect your environment. So for example, a good view of a public IP address, going to look at, you can see that what's behind that. It is malicious, utilizing a self-signed certificate, and also which articles might be linked to that kind of threats. So looking at a review, always look at a compliant cloud provider. And I can't stress it enough. Whenever you building cloud infrastructure, always start with governance in place. Look and decide what really needs to be set. If you've already created something, it's already too late, just like my VM example. Always ensure that you have specific policies that protect your employees from making mistakes. Always look and view at identity protection. Identity is the number one thing that you want to have secured, and enable role-based access control so people don't have global administrator rights or full administrator rights. They only have admin rights when they need that. Backups, important. It saved a lot of my clients that were impacted through ransomware. I have this great concept about always ensuring that your backups are remote, offline. It's easier to quickly to set something back if it's broken. Uh, Use cloud products like Defender for Cloud and other cloud products. Always ensure that you review your architectures. What worked and was good enough now might not be good enough anymore. And there's always improvements and newer technologies and ways in which you can do something better. So always evaluate new security possibilities, how you can go and fix those items. And that's pretty much it for my session. I hope I'm doing good for time. My name is Adnan Hendricks. Once again, contact me with @microspecialist, and I'm not sure if there are any questions. Any questions, Kazim, or?
No questions.
Okay, great. Well, in that case, I've left everybody with my details. If there are any questions afterwards in the next couple of days, send me a message. And I just want to say thanks for inviting me to present. I wish I was there. Unfortunately, I'm stuck here in the cold Netherlands due to the problems with our local airport having issues. I've really enjoyed the conference so far, and including the masterclass bootcamp I gave as a pre-conf workshop. But really looking forward to coming back to Nigeria and chatting to everybody live next time.
Thank you.
Thank you.